have some notes, and for lack of the PowerPoint, I will make in the great tunes of my voice. Uh, so when I hear all the discussions we've been having here, I start thinking about a couple of things that I would like to put in perspective regarding Puerto Rico and the experiences that we've had in the Caribbean. So we've spoken about costs, benefits, vulnerabilities in this era. However, there's not only the monetary cost, although that's the figure that we always see. Hurricane Maria is Puerto Rico will get 91 billion, and they will don't know how to manage it and stuff like that. It is not, yeah, they're corrupt. We hear that in the news. There's also a human cost here. There's stresses associated with post-disaster condition. I don't think I need to. I was not there, so but I would like to emphasize that there's people that are living with PTSD for these disasters. When Hurricane Dorian was announced to be en route to Puerto Rico, you could just read in social media a lot of people scared, a lot of people saying, I don't want it. My best friend called me and said if he could come and stay here with me in State College, which is, it would be better than Puerto Rico in that situation, right? And how do people without the knowledge and how to navigate the system cope with post-disaster conditions? What we've found right now is a lot of people who needed help but didn't know how to get it and didn't know how to navigate the complexities of the system. Something that we were speaking about this, Marla, with Cecilio. FEMA established an internet application for benefits in a post-disaster environment. How am I going to fill this form if I don't have internet or energy? And then they said, okay, we'll announce places that they can go fill these forms. Guess where they announced it? On the internet, right? So, there were no redundancies in the system that could help those who most needed it. And for example, people decided to start sending goods to communities in Puerto Rico, and Marla and Cecilio, of course, know more about this than me. But of course, they would just Google, low SES community in Puerto Rico, and boom, they'll see a website of a community that has a lot of things happening. That community has a website. A lot of communities do not have a website. Probably the resources you're bringing to the island should be going to those that don't have a website. But it was easier to send it to those that already had it. And then thinking about island territories, if you think about this sort of issue of things that matter this much to this amount of people and things that matter this much to this amount of people, island territories, Puerto Rico, Bahamas, Dominican Republic, Virgin Islands, they don't produce most of the CO2 emissions in the world. However, they're disproportionately hit, like you illustrated, impacted by hurricanes. In Puerto Rico, my estimate, which I still hold that is the correct one, says that it's 1,200-ish deaths. And in Bahamas, there's already 2,500 persons still missing. I'm working or actively collaborating with a group called Statisticians Without Borders, and we're trying to access the information of the preliminary death counts to help them assess the situation as we speak. I have a meeting after this conference, so if you see me running out, I may be taking a call. And just to do a quick assessment of the of the impact of Dorian in terms of human cost. So regarding the generational effects, indeed, the older generations will not experience these things as long as the younger, but they will still feel it because we know from social autopsies of heat waves, for example, in Chicago in the 1990s, that older persons were the ones more prone to die due to heat wave related situations. They were more likely to die alone, locked in their apartments. And that's a fantastic book, Eric Kleinberg, Heat Wave. If you can get it. It's a really cool book. And so they will not feel it as long as the younger generations, but they will feel it with more intensity in older ages. So this is not only a topic for the young generations. Older generations should care about this. Procedural equity. How am I included if I have two jobs in these processes of discussions and hearings? How do I make the time out of a complicated schedule? And we know that people are working two jobs, mostly minorities, mostly people who are more vulnerable to these situations, environmental disasters, hazardous waste. How do I take time to go to a hearing where I probably won't be given a microphone? We had a case right now. Somebody wanted to speak earlier today, and he was told this was not the place. I have an opinion about that, but I'll share it later. So one example I found is regarding this aftermath disaster. It's kind of like disaster capitalism. There's a lot of this happening in Puerto Rico right now. And one clear example comes from kind of like this sale of schools. We're experiencing population decline. There's fertility rate is about 1. People are not having children at the replacement rate. So there's no need for many schools. So they closed for about 400 schools. There was a New York Times article published a couple of days ago on this matter. And my cousin leads Neighborhood Alliance, like Residents Association, and they were trying to buy the school because we were listening and we were hearing that churches were getting schools for $1, that new companies that came out of nowhere were getting schools for $1, and they were doing whatever they wanted with these facilities that cost more than $1. But these neighborhood alliances were facing roadblocks. Were not, they were being told, oh, the sale price is about $10,000. Yeah, but what about churches that you're giving them for $1 so they can create their own, private schools, etc.? So, how do we achieve procedural equities? I don't have the solution, but I think this is an issue that even in post-disaster conditions gets exacerbated to the point in which things become unmanageable and ridiculous at some point. And mind you, my cousin is still going through the process of trying to at least secure a meeting to see if this school will get in his hands. Probably he should have donated money to a political party or something. And then distributive equity, benefits versus externalities. And I know externalities is this thing that economists like to account for, and they calculate it. But how accessible are the new benefits and innovation and technologies to these people that I'm talking about, people who have two jobs, people who are working 9 to 5, trying to make a living, like Dolly Parton. So for me, it goes sort of to the root causes of a lot of inequalities, and climate change and natural disasters just pretty much unveil these things, and they just put them right in front of us in black and white. So a couple of things to wrap up. I excuse for not having a more developed presentation. I really like to present things in PowerPoints and put animations. But do communities have the education needed and the resources needed to identify opportunities as quick as we want? And when they do, can they establish a plan? Do they have the resources to carry out a plan to take advantage of opportunities? Sometimes things happen, and in 2 days you gotta get things ready. How do we educate communities and members of the community? And again, I know from grassroots efforts that I follow that it is really difficult to get people to come to these things. So how do we reach to them? Facebook may be a way, but Lindsay and Kim Kardashian and all the influencers are out there also, and they get more attention than other stuff, than other things community-based. And, kind of seeing things we do as academics and as researchers, I'm sad to say that most of the times these studies are disconnected from communities. And I was guilty of that at some point, so I'm, kind of a mea culpa. But a lot of universities go, they see, and they leave. and they don't integrate themselves in what the community is suffering. They just care about the paper. We may want to take a step forward and not simply care about the paper, start caring about the communities we're studying, the communities that we want. What is the benefit that a community gets out of a paper that I publish? That is something that I always try to figure out before I start even writing. And to the extent that, which I got a really good advice from a friend of mine, it was always focus on solving problems. If you're able to solve a problem, then somebody will benefit. Regarding climate change, injustice, and CO2 emissions, and I think there's a lot of vulnerabilities that get exacerbated by this, but sea rise level, for example, is an issue that is causing a lot of migration. And people think, oh, they'll just move in a house in the neighborhood. No. People will move to a house of whom? Anybody cares to wager here? Where would you move if your house gets flooded? Yeah, family member, right? Who may live in another state, who may live, really far away from the place where you do all your daily life activities, right? So out of nowhere, and there's another book called Everything in Its Path. It's about it was in Georgia, right? Yeah, I think West Virginia. I think it was a flooding in West Virginia, and Everything on Its Path. It's a fantastic book, and but it speaks about how communities get destroyed by environmental events. Not only communities, but this social fabric that keeps us moving forward, or social support networks. If I'm moving from, which I did, if I moved from Puerto Rico to Texas, I have to start building things from scratch. Then I left Texas and I came to Pennsylvania, and I have to start building things from scratch again. These things take a toll on us. Coastal erosion, power. So, for example, power dynamics. Amazonia is burning. How much power do indigenous communities have in front of Bolsonaro and Brazil? Like, there's this really hideous quote. A lot of land for a few Indians is what he said. How much power do these people who depend on this land have to make the government care of what's happening to the place where generations and generations of their people have lived, right? So I guess we need to start building a system in which communities can be empowered and they can actually start acknowledging that this will be beneficial down the road, but just as communities need to be educated, governments need to be educated, because I feel oftentimes we put a lot of burden in people who do not have, the sole responsibility for these. And I say it out of personal experience, when they see you as a minority scholar in an institution like Penn State, they say, great, you can help us diversifying the student. So it's like, yes, I can help the student body. And I said, yes, I can help with that. But, the burden of diversifying the system then goes on top of the diverse faculty, and I may not be trained to do that. So just closing remarks. Equity empowerment, do we have systems that allow this to happen and reach solutions? In most cases, no, and the Puerto Rico PREPA is one clear example. This operates like a private company, has a CEO, and they're spending a lot of money, not in the right places. What are the limits? Older folks, infrastructure dependence. We now are dealing with with health conditions that come from degenerative diseases, diabetes, and Alzheimer's, etc. So infrastructure dependence is something that we need to start looking at. How many persons live or depend on ventilators, insulin, things that are related to energy consumption. Technological dependence, communication-wise. Who here has a landline in their house still? You? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Out of all of us, landlines were the way we could communicate normally. Internet sales go down after these disasters. These processes will cost money. Communities don't have it, so it will require an investment. Demographically speaking, we know that houses that are older are less efficient, and in most cases, there's no easy solution to this. This will cost money also. In a study conducted in the state I used to live in Texas, we found, the center I worked at found that the top 10% of the oldest houses accounted for approximately 25% of energy consumption because of how inefficient they were, and just health-wise, heat waves and increasing temperatures will increase a lot of symptoms such as stroke, falls, injury, heart attack, dehydration, and all the things that come with that. So when conditions become unsustainable, people will migrate, or they will stay and adapt. But we'll need to see how feasible is adaptation. In a study that we are doing, and we have right now under review, we have estimated that in the next 50 years, life expectancy will go down by 1 year due to excessive deaths in Europe. And that's just in Europe, which is a place that we don't hear that is a sort of a victim of environmental disasters. But just last summer, they had one of the more warmer summers that they've ever had. So this is a topic that you can start looking at it from multiple places. And there's a lot of literature, but what I would say is universities have tools for helping communities, and I think it's time for us as academics to step forward and help communities lead the way in change. But also, we need to start speaking with politicians and policymakers. Communities will listen, but they don't have the power. And looking forward, Penn State has a lot of initiative for this. Research to action is another way to do it. And I hope it happens, and I hope communities benefit from this. Thank you.